You probably noticed that I did something unusual just now. I did not place the book of the gospel in front of the podium because I wanted to say something about that. In the first reading today, in the second reading today, from Paul's letter to the Galatians, and in that Paul tells the Galatian Christians, and that strikes all of us, and especially me, the gospel preached by me is not of human origin. For I did not receive it from a human being, nor was I taught it, but it came through a revelation of Jesus Christ. The very word gospel, in the language in which Paul wrote this letter, which is koine or Hellenistic Greek, the words really means the good message, the good news that we have. Every now and then we hear the word evangelization is a derivative from the Greek noun evangelion. And in that, the message or the gospel here is not the word that we should read. It's the message that has to be heard, have to be listened to. So in that regard, in a liturgical context, as you see, which is we do that all the time, we place the book of the gospel in front of the podium, which is for liturgical celebration. But in fact, from a scriptural and theological meaning, the gospel, the good news, must be listened to, must be heard. Because why? Paul goes on to tell us that message, that good news was revealed to him by the risen Christ Jesus. And for that reason, Paul was commissioned. That's why he called himself an apostle, which is the one who was sent out to preach that very message of the gospel, of the good news, namely that Jesus Christ died and was raised from the dead by God the Father. So everyone who believed in God's power to raise Jesus, to raise those who died to life, will be saved as well. So that, in fact, that is the one gospel message that Paul preached. Let us begin this mind. I will go back to my theme earlier, but I wanted to share with you the topic of my homily today. And I tried to coin this phrase, and I finally came to this: not to die of shame. Not to die of shame. Many of us in my age or younger, or a little bit older, would remember a movie that was made in 1997 called The Edge, starred by Anthony Hopkins and Alec Baldwin. The movie, the plot is really about friendship and betrayal. And in that, it is 1 hour and 57 minutes long. 31 minutes into the movie, the audience is taken into a scene in which the plane carrying a wealthy billionaire, Charles Moores, starred by Anthony Hopkins, crashes down in the Alaskan wilderness. Together with the 2 other surviving passengers, the 3 of them began to panic. In their brief moments of desperation, Charles remembers the phrase in the book that he has read earlier called "Lost in the Wilds." The author says, quote, "Most people, when they are lost in the wilds, they die of shame. They die of shame. They ask themselves, what did I do wrong? How could I ever gotten myself into this?" So they sit there, they did nothing, and they die. They should have done one thing that could have saved their lives. Then one of the other 2 survivors asked Charles, "And what is that, Charles?" Then Charles says, "Thinking." End quote. To that, I would like to add that thinking, feeling reassured, and acting out especially in the context of our religious practice, our faith, our Christianity. We cannot just sit there and do nothing when we are in desperation. Feeling reassured that God is with us, that Jesus suffered the same fate or even worse than what we've gone through or going through. And we have to act out instead of sitting there and die of shame. Putting ourselves or leaving this movie scene, of course, it is fiction, but we also see that many things in our lives and many encounters in which we can see ourselves facing desperation, lost, and confused. But if we only sit there and let our own life fade away, then we are like those who are lost in the wilds. They sit there and they die of shame. Just put ourselves in the context of Paul in the early decades after Jesus died. And all of the three reading nows bring us back to the time in which now Jesus was raised from the dead, appeared to his disciples, Peter on the Sea of Galilee, and then in the Acts of the Apostle, also in the context of the risen Jesus, and the letter of Paul to the Galatians. All of these three readings tell us that it is now time that Jesus, who suffered, died, and now was raised from the dead, who appeared to his disciples and not only commissioned them, but gave them the command to go out and preach the good news of salvation to all the world. Put ourselves in Paul's context. He was a Pharisee. He was a persecutor of Jesus' church. And he was the one who adamant about Judaism. Had Paul not taken what Jesus asked him, Christianity would be much less than what we are today. Paul took that challenge and faced it forward, even to the point, as many of you by now, I hope, received my first pastoral letter, to the point in which Paul suffered martyrdom. Likewise, Peter, as Jesus commissioned him to feed his lambs, to tend his sheep, had Peter not done likewise in a similar manner of Paul, to go out beyond the boundaries of Jerusalem and Israel and Galilee, to bring the gospel, the message of salvation, namely that God, who raised Jesus from the dead, will also raise anyone who believes in that good message. Then none of us would have been here. None of us would have felt reassured by the love of God, by the help of the Spirit of Jesus. As we celebrate this beautiful feast and solemnity of the two important figures in our Christian tradition, St. Paul and St. Peter, we are once again invited to preach that very message that God will save anyone and all who come to believe in this gospel, in this good message, in the saving power of God. We, instead of should act like unlike those who sit there and die of shame, we need to reinvigorate ourselves, think how we can act out, and think and feel reassured that God is always with us.